How would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? That's not a question to be taken lightly. It's one of those rare questions that has the power to shake a man out of complacency and force him to see his life in stark relief. I want you to pause right now wherever you are and really think about it, not casually, not as a clever line to be remembered and forgotten, but deeply. How would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? What choices would you make? How would you speak? Where would you go? Who would you become? This idea isn't for the faint of heart. It's meant for those who are ready to examine themselves honestly. Because to imagine a life without failure is to remove the single greatest excuse that people use to justify their inaction. Fear of failure is the anchor that holds most men in place. It explains their half-hearted efforts, their hesitation, their compromises. It's the silent chain that rattles every time they think about taking a step forward. But what if that chain was gone? What if you could act with certainty, with confidence, with a sense of inevitability? What would your life look like then? I want you to hold that thought in your mind as we begin this journey together. And while you're here listening, thinking about your future, I want to invite you to do something very simple. If this message resonates with you, if you're the kind of person who is committed to your own growth, I encourage you to subscribe and stay connected. Because the ideas we explore here aren't meant to be heard once and forgotten, they're meant to be lived day after day until they shape you into someone unrecognizable to your former self. Now let's get back to our question. How would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? Most people have never truly dared to think this way. They say they want success. They dream about better circumstances. But when pressed, they admit that they're not sure if they have what it takes. They speak of their goals with caveats and disclaimers, careful not to appear too committed, too vulnerable. Because if they try and fail, what would people think? What would they think of themselves? This is the trap that holds so many back. The fear of failure is so insidious because it operates in silence. It kills dreams not with loud rejection, but with quiet hesitation. But imagine for a moment that failure was off the table, that success was inevitable, that the thing you want most would be yours if you simply chose to pursue it fully. Would you move differently? Would you finally give yourself permission to try without reservation? This is not idle philosophy. It's the most practical question you can ask yourself. Because your answer reveals the gap between who you are and who you could become. Let me tell you something that may sound simple, but is in fact one of the most profound truths you will ever hear. You become what you think about. I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it because it is the foundation of everything. If you constantly think about failure, about what could go wrong, about the obstacles in your path, you will find yourself living that reality. Not because the world is against you, but because you have programmed yourself to expect it. The mind is like fertile soil. It will grow whatever seeds you plant in it. Plant fear and you'll harvest hesitation. Plant courage and you'll reap action. How many people do you know who are living small lives not because of their circumstances, but because of the limits they have placed on their own thinking? They go to work at jobs they hate, not because they must, but because they never dared to plan an alternative. They accept mediocre relationships because they fear being alone more than they desire true connection. They settle for average results because they fear failing at excellence. The tragedy is that they don't even see it happening. They tell themselves they are being realistic, but realism without vision is simply pessimism in disguise. So I ask you again, how would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? Would you start the business you've been thinking about for years? Would you speak to the person you've admired from afar? Would you write the book, give the speech, take the trip, change careers? Would you finally stand up for what you believe in, without worrying about the opinions of others? These are not abstract questions. They are the very roadmap to your best life. The difference between those who achieve great things and those who don't is not talent. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It is the willingness to act despite uncertainty. The willingness to take steps forward even when the outcome is not guaranteed. The most successful people in history were not those who never failed. They were those who refused to let failure stop them. They understood that failure is not final, it is simply feedback. It is a lesson wrapped in temporary discomfort. Think of Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before perfecting the electric light bulb. When asked about his failures, he said, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's not just optimism, that is a mindset forged by understanding that failure is part of the path to success. Or consider Abraham Lincoln, who lost election after election before becoming one of the greatest presidents in American history. Imagine if he had let early failures define him. What about you? What would your life look like if you redefined failure not as a threat, but as a teacher? If you could see each setback as a stepping stone? If you could face rejection and keep moving forward? The truth is you can, but it requires a decision. A decision to change the way you think about failure itself. You see, the man who knows he cannot fail acts differently. He does not wait for permission. He does not ask whether he is good enough. He does not need external validation. He chooses his goal, and he moves toward it with determination and faith. And in doing so, he becomes the kind of man who succeeds, not because life is easy, but because he is unshakable. Let me remind you of something ancient and true. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. What are you sowing in your mind today? Doubt? Fear? Hesitation? Or faith? Courage? Determination? You will harvest what you plant. There is no escaping this law. You might ignore it. You might hope it's not true, but you cannot break it. You can only break yourself against it. So choose carefully. Plant deliberately. Think intentionally. Because you are always investing in something. The question is, are you investing in fear or in possibility? In limitation or in abundance? In regret or in purpose? If you're listening to this right now, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear these words. You were meant to confront this question. How would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? I challenge you not to dismiss this as another motivational idea to forget by tomorrow. Instead, write it down. Carry it with you. Ask yourself this question every morning, and then act, because nothing will change in your life until you do. And if you're ready to take that journey, if you're ready to explore these ideas more deeply, to become the person you were meant to be, then stay with me, because this is only the beginning. Most people will go through their entire lives without ever asking themselves the question we began with. How would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail? It's such a simple question, but it has the power to reveal everything about a person's true desires and their hidden fears. It strips away the polite excuses, the socially acceptable compromises, and leaves only the truth. Because in that question lies an invitation to imagine life without the shackles of doubt, to see possibility where once there was only hesitation. Think about it carefully. What would you dare to attempt if you were guaranteed success? Would you speak differently? Would you stand taller? Would you make decisions faster with more conviction? You see, the difference between the man who lives boldly and the man who lives cautiously isn't found in talent or intelligence. It's found in their willingness to trust themselves, their willingness to act as if success is certain. This is not mere fantasy. It is, in fact, the mindset that every truly successful person has cultivated. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They do not wait for every risk to be removed. They simply decide that the reward is worth the risk. They understand that certainty is not something you are given. It is something you create. But what stops most people from thinking this way? It's the fear of failure. It's the voice that whispers, what if it doesn't work? What will people say? What if I lose everything? These questions are so persuasive because they appeal to our deepest need for safety. But safety, real safety, is an illusion. Life itself is uncertain. The man who clings to safety above all else is not avoiding risk. He is simply choosing a different kind of risk. The risk of regret. The risk of never knowing what he was truly capable of. So let me ask you again. Which risk would you rather live with? The risk of trying and failing, or the certainty of never having tried at all? It is better to fail in pursuit of something meaningful than to succeed at something trivial. Because in the end, failure is not the enemy. Failure is the price of learning. It is the tuition you pay for wisdom. Every setback contains a lesson, if you have the courage to seek it. Consider the farmer who understands that to reap a harvest he must first plant seeds, knowing that some will fail to sprout. He does not despair at the seeds that die. He simply plants more. He knows the law. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And he trusts it. The same law governs your mind. Plant thoughts of fear, and you will reap anxiety. Plant thoughts of courage, and you will reap strength. Now many people hear this and think, that sounds good, but it's too simple. Surely success requires more. And they're right in one sense. Success requires work. It requires planning. It requires discipline. But all of these flow from the single decision to believe in possibility. Without that decision, the best plan is never written. Without that belief, the hardest work is never sustained. The foundation of all achievement is the willingness to believe that you can achieve. So let's make this practical. I want you to take a moment right now and choose one goal that you've held back from pursuing. Something you want deeply but have convinced yourself is too risky, too unlikely. See it clearly in your mind. Picture it in detail. Now ask yourself, if I knew I couldn't fail, what would be my very next step? Don't worry about the whole journey, just the next step. That is where your power lies, not in worrying about obstacles you cannot see yet, but in taking the step you can see right now. Most people wait for clarity before they act. But the truth is, clarity comes from acting. The path reveals itself as you walk it. The man who waits for certainty will wait forever, but the man who acts in faith finds certainty along the way. This is the paradox of success. You don't get to be confident first, you act first, and confidence follows. Consider the captain of a ship who sets sail not because the sea is calm, but because he knows his destination. He cannot control the wind or the waves, but he can control his own course. He can adjust, adapt, persevere. And so it is with you. You may not control every circumstance, but you always control your response. You always control your next decision. And if you choose to act as if success were inevitable, you will begin to think differently. You will speak differently. You will carry yourself with the quiet authority that comes from knowing you are committed. And that commitment has a power of its own. It attracts resources. It attracts people who want to help. It inspires confidence in others, because they see it in you. Now you might say, but what if I fail anyway? And I say good, because failure is not defeat. Failure is data. Failure is education. The man who fails and learns is closer to success than the man who never tried. The only true failure is the failure to try at all. Ask any successful person and they will tell you the same story in different words. They tried, they failed, they adjusted, they tried again, and eventually they succeeded. This is the universal law of growth. A child does not learn to walk without falling. A writer does not write well without writing badly first. A leader does not lead without making mistakes. The path to mastery runs through failure, not around it. This is why the question, how would you act if you knew you wouldn't fail, is so important, because it forces you to imagine a version of yourself that acts without fear. And once you see that version, you realize he is not so different from you. He is simply you minus hesitation, minus self-doubt, minus the excuses you've grown comfortable with. You might find yourself wondering, is this really possible? Can I really change the way I think? And the answer is yes. Not overnight, not without effort, but absolutely yes. Because thought is the seed of action, and repeated action becomes habit, and habit shapes destiny. This is not a comforting lie, it is the oldest truth known to man. The man who changes his thoughts changes his life. But he must be vigilant. He must guard his mind as the most precious possession he owns. He must choose carefully what he allows in, what he dwells on, what he repeats to himself day after day. Because the mind, like the fertile earth, will grow whatever is planted in it. Plant weeds and you will harvest ruin. Plant strong seeds and you will harvest abundance. So choose your thoughts carefully. Act boldly. Speak as someone who knows where he is going. Live as someone who cannot fail. Not because you are arrogant, but because you understand that failure is not the end. It is the process. It is the fire that tempers you into something stronger. And if you're finding value in this message, if these words are striking a chord within you, I encourage you to share them. Share them with someone who needs to hear them. Because ideas are meant to spread, and the more people commit to living this way, the more the world itself changes. We'll continue this journey together, exploring what it truly means to live without the fear of failure. Because the life you want is waiting for you. But you must choose it, and you must act as though success is your only option.